when the interview was over, he was taking me over and playing me, tracks he'd just recorded. And, here he was, like, he couldn't contain himself. I mean, he'd start moving and kind of dancing and singing along with the lyrics and stopping and making changes and talking to the engineer. And I could just see how energized he was by the creativity of the moment.
For years, Ron Howard looked like that one Hollywood legend who dodged all the behind-the-scenes madness, always flashing that smile, staying composed, the golden boy who morphed into a master director with credentials that speak volumes. But what folks didn't catch was the quiet storm brewing inside him, all those unspoken thoughts, buried memories, and truths he kept locked down while the world only saw perfection. Now, after the devastating news about Rob Reiner's death rocked the entertainment industry, Ron's finally breaking his silence, and what he's dropping is shaking everyone up. He's spilling tea about the real Hollywood, the hidden competition, the buried feelings, and that mutual respect that never made it to the cameras. The situation around Reiner's passing clearly hit something raw in him, forcing Ron to confront how delicate everything really is, how quickly things flip, and how even the brightest stars carry complicated histories with each other. What's crazy is how deeply personal this whole thing feels. Ron's decades-long silence is cracking wide open, and his words pack serious weight. He's dropping hints about emotions and memories connected straight to Rob Reiner, and people are just now realizing their bond ran way deeper than anyone suspected. Ron Howard's story, born March 1, 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma, suddenly hits different now, heavier than ever before. Fame didn't even register to him yet when his parents, actor Rance Howard and actress Jean Spiegel, raised him in a universe where creativity dominated but discipline stayed front and center. It mixed imagination with brutal hours and that non-stop Hollywood uncertainty. That's the world that molded Ron, but also the same world that connected him in unexpected ways to someone like Rob Reiner. And what he's revealing now might flip how people view both legends forever.
There was a point where he was delusional and having kind of episodes that were drug related, but brushes with the law and flirting with kind of homelessness and it was unsustainable. He'd been through rehab a couple of times unsuccessfully, and looked like it was just getting worse.
Before most toddlers could string together sentences, Ron Howard was already planted under blazing movie set lights at just 18 months old. He popped up in Frontier Woman, completely clueless that he'd just signed a lifetime contract with the camera. That single tiny role kicked off something that would shadow him forever, a career that never gave him breathing room to bounce, even when he desperately wanted out. By the late 1950s, the Howard crew packed their bags and rolled to California chasing that explosive television dream. From that moment, any concept of normal life basically evaporated.
We were the #1 show in television, and yet Andy wanted to move on. And that's what was going to happen. And I was okay with it. I wasn't like all year tormented by this.
Dinner tables transformed into script stations, while his pop's Rance juggled military obligations with constant auditions. Little Ron, still losing baby teeth, was already spitting lines like a seasoned pro. Instead of cruising bikes with neighborhood kids, his playground became sound stages, his childhood bathed in studio lights rather than sunshine. Years down the line, Ron described those early days as a golden cage. Safe, sure, but suffocating with loneliness. It practically sparkled with emptiness. He had fame's security blanket, yet found himself trapped in an adult-built world, missing those simple moments other kids experienced without thinking twice. Then came the game-changer moment, October 3rd, 1960, when The Andy Griffith Show premiered, and 6-year-old Ron instantly transformed into America's sweetheart Opie Taylor. Overnight, he became the nation's poster child for pure innocence, a symbol every household worshipped. But behind that glowing persona lurked a quiet little boy grinding through homework in a cramped studio room at Desilu, listening to genuine laughter and playtime drifting in from outside. His father battled to protect him however possible, fighting for superior scripts, keeping him grounded, always reminding him to never act cute, just act honest. That single piece of wisdom shaped Ron's entire artistic foundation. But even with parental love and protection, nothing could erase that ache of being the child everyone adored on screen, yet not truly belonging to himself off-screen.
The next film was Apollo 13, which was all about accuracy and authenticity. And slowly but surely, I just began to find real joy and creativity, ingenuity through the research, through the fact-finding, and then finding ways to use everything that I learned about drama and comedy, for that matter, to sort of present these ideas to audiences in ways that could be really, compelling and entertaining, but rich with detail.
Somewhere during all that crushing pressure and spotlight intensity, Rob Reiner was climbing in that same cutthroat industry, another young spirit discovering how fame lifts you up while quietly boxing you in. All that pressure, those lights, those watching eyes, the burden of being America's son. It didn't just vanish when cameras powered down. Those quiet fears stacked up year after year until they became woven into Ron Howard's DNA. Looking back decades later, Ron straight up admits those wounds from his early years never properly healed. They tagged along into adulthood, reshaping how he viewed fame, family, and even the struggles of cats like Rob Reiner, who knew that bizarre cocktail of admiration and isolation way too well. As Ron rolled into his teenage years, the world witnessed nothing but success. But underneath that shining image was a young man carrying emotional baggage of someone twice his age. When The Andy Griffith Show wrapped in April 1968, Ron was only 14. But he'd already survived 8 seasons inside a perfectly scripted universe that wasn't remotely real. He'd grown up surrounded by caring adults on set, yet missed out on that beautiful chaos real teenage life delivers. The mistakes, the freedom, the rebellion that shapes your identity. His education got split straight down the middle, half in actual Burbank classrooms, half between takes with tutors hovering beside rolling dollies. He studied math while grips shifted cameras inches from his desk. Now, lunch wasn't in a cafeteria with peers his age, but with Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, and the stage crew. Those moments overflowed with love, but also served as constant reminders he wasn't living the same storyline as everyone else. Then came that unforgettable moment during The Music Man in 1962. Ron was only 8, staring down a dance scene he just couldn't nail. He turned to Shirley Jones and whispered he couldn't do it. She gave him comfort, helped settle his nerves, and the crew cleverly masked his mistakes by shooting him from the knees up. The audience witnessed confidence, sweetness, and charm, but internally it was pure fear and pressure colliding together. Stories like these make Ron's later empathy for Rob Reiner hit so powerfully. Both men matured in the spotlight's glow, both had fathers steering their paths, and both discovered early on that behind every flawless take sits a child just trying to catch their breath.
Today I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer Reiner.
Those quiet anxieties never truly abandoned Ron Howard. They just mastered hiding behind a calm smile over time. He perfected the art of performing confidence, even when he felt none whatsoever. That skill became his secret shield in Hollywood, helping him navigate the chaos, the egos, and the relentless expectations. While others like Rob Reiner generated headlines for being bold and outspoken, Ron kept it cool, studying everything and everyone around him with that trademark steady focus. Then dropped Happy Days in 1974, the next massive chapter. Ron was just 19 when he stepped into Gary Marshall's office, having zero clue he was about to land another role that would lock him into America's heart all over again. As Richie Cunningham, he became the nation's favorite boy next door. Polite, loyal, impossibly wholesome. But as fans fell hard for Richie, Ron felt those walls closing in again. The image people worshipped started boxing him in, trapping the real him behind that scripted smile. By 1977, at 23, he was still faking being a teenager while the entire outside world was transforming rapidly. Headlines screamed about protests, culture was shifting, people his age were questioning everything. But Richie Cunningham stayed frozen in a nostalgia bubble. That disconnect gnawed at Ron until one day he decided to push back. He wrote a memo to ABC Network requesting just one storyline mentioning the Vietnam War. Something real, something reflecting the world people actually inhabited. But the request got shut down immediately. That rejection stung hard. The frustration didn't explode. It simmered quietly, morphing into a deeper type of exhaustion. Ron felt invisible behind the character, like he was living someone else's existence while his own life sat paused. The longer it dragged on, the clearer it became. If he wanted to reclaim his voice, to grow, to evolve, to create something authentic, he had to shift behind the camera. And that realization, the one pushing him from actor to filmmaker, was the same type of awakening Rob Reiner would experience later. Both men hunting for their own truth inside a system obsessed with keeping them frozen in time. Directing wasn't just some fantasy for Ron Howard. It was his escape hatch, his method to finally breathe again after years of being dictated how to act, what to say, who to be. Getting behind the camera felt like busting out of a cage.
I was married already. We didn't have children yet, but starting to think about a family. And And when Cheryl completely supported me turning down the what would have been a huge raise.
His lengthy journey through fame gave him profound understanding of what it means to discover your authentic voice, something he shared with people like Rob Reiner, who also found themselves through directing, though their styles and public personas couldn't have been more opposite. That long-awaited freedom arrived in 1977 when Roger Corman dropped Ron an offer that flipped everything: star in Eat My Dust, and in return, direct your own film. It wasn't about chasing another hit or grabbing more attention, it was about owning his craft for the first time. That film became Grand Theft Auto, a wild car crash comedy he co-wrote with his father, Rance Howard. They had just $62,000 to make it, pocket change by Hollywood standards, but somehow managed to execute massive stunts, wreck around 70 cars, and flip that small gamble into $15 million at the box office. For the first time ever, Ron felt genuine creative control, the kind acting never delivered. It was thrilling, intoxicating, empowering. But in Hollywood, control always carries a hidden price tag. Every film became deeply personal. Every detail mattered way too much. He obsessed over his work, absorbing every note, every scene, every outcome straight to his core. The hits started rolling. Night Shift in 1982, Splash in 1984, then Cocoon, Willow, and Parenthood. Each project elevated his reputation and boosted his budgets, but with every success came higher expectations. Studios began trusting him completely, counting on him to deliver magic every single time. And that trust quickly morphed into nonstop, unspoken pressure shadowing him everywhere.
These are changing times. Relax. So, in their earliest stages, when they might have been able to do something, I think I was a voice kind of telling him to back off as parents. And so those are regrets that I have.
By the early 90s, Ron wasn't just the kid from Mayberry anymore. He was a powerhouse, a Hollywood name carrying serious weight. And just like Rob Reiner, he'd stepped into the type of spotlight that doesn't just shine, it burns if you're not careful. Ron Howard's obsession with control and perfection wasn't purely about ego. It was about proving something to himself. That same drive gave him deep understanding of what other powerhouse directors like Rob Reiner faced behind the camera. The endless nights, the pressure to deliver brilliance every single time, and the quiet exhaustion tagging along. Then came 1995, the year that nearly shattered him and defined him simultaneously. Apollo 13 wasn't just another movie, it was a mission. Ron was determined to tell those astronauts' story with total authenticity, no shortcuts, no manufactured drama, just raw truth. He took realism so seriously, the crew filmed a mind-blowing 612 zero-gravity sequences aboard NASA's infamous Vomit Comet, where each weightlessness moment lasted just 23 seconds. He and his squad didn't settle for movie props either. They constructed mission control from scratch using real NASA panels costing $1 each. Every light, every switch, every flicker had to be flawless. Nothing less would cut it. Ron pushed himself to the edge, grinding 18-hour days for 3 straight months, snatching only a few hours of sleep, refusing to simplify even the most complex science on screen. But perfection carries a breaking point. One morning, his body finally screamed enough. He collapsed right there on set from severe exhaustion and dehydration.
People would ask me from the publishing world, did I ever think I would do an autobiography or memoir? And I always said, no, don't think so. But I asked Tom one day, and he said, well, if you ever do it, focus on your childhood.
The entire production had to pause for a day and a half while he recovered. When Ron finally returned, pale but determined, the cast and crew greeted him wearing shirts reading, Mission Control. It was their way of saying, we've got you, we'll ride through anything. He flashed that calm, humble smile the world knows so well, but deep down, he knew the truth. He'd gone way too far. The line between passion and self-destruction had blurred, and he'd crossed it without even noticing. And in that painful realization, he grasped something Rob Reiner had faced too, that sometimes brilliance's price is losing sight of yourself in the process. Ron Howard had morphed into the type of perfectionist who could push himself past the edge without even clocking it. That haunting truth stuck with him for years. Not just because of what it did to his health, but because of what it stole from the people who mattered most. The lessons from that painful chapter about control, truth, and authenticity reshaped how he viewed Hollywood, its power and its toll on those chasing greatness too aggressively. So, when the heartbreaking news about Rob Reiner's passing dropped, it wasn't just sadness flooding over Ron. It was something deeper. He felt the regret, the reflection, the understanding of what relentless dedication can quietly rob from you. Both men had existed under the same creative fire, both had chased perfection, and both had learned how easily passion could morph into isolation. But even before Reiner's loss, Ron had already lived through his own personal heartbreak, one still weighing on him like a shadow. The year was 1991, and on paper everything looked flawless. His daughter Jocelyn had just been born, his career was skyrocketing, and his creative freedom hit an all-time high. He was the director every studio craved, the name attached to guaranteed success. Then Universal announced a 6-month shoot for Far and Away in Ireland. Ron made a choice he thought he could manage. He bounced for half a year. Cheryl, his devoted wife, stayed home raising their newborn twins and their young daughter Bryce Dallas Howard. Meanwhile, Ron was across the world buried under endless rewrites, brutal weather, complicated shoots, and non-stop studio pressure. He kept telling himself it was temporary, that the sacrifices were justified. But deep down, something in him sensed he was drifting too far. When he finally came home, the silence in the house screamed everything.
He went through a tough time back in the day with drugs and alcohol.
Well, boy, that was a difficult, heartbreaking time and thing to witness, and it was terrifying.
The laughter felt distant, the connection fractured. He realized too late that success had arrived at a cost he never wanted to pay. That regret, that missed time, that emotional distance, it's something he's carried ever since. And maybe that's why Rob Reiner's story slammed him so hard, because in some ways it mirrored the pain Ron already knew too well. When Ron Howard walked through the door after that lengthy shoot, the moment greeting him nearly destroyed him. His baby daughter Jocelyn didn't recognize him. Bryce, his older little girl, barely reacted. And Cheryl, his rock, his partner, carried an exhaustion so profound it didn't even need words. In 2025, Ron finally confessed that memory broke something inside him. That was the day he grasped the brutal truth. All the success, the fame, the awards meant absolutely nothing if it cost him the people he loved most. He made a quiet promise right then. Never again. He swore he'd never vanish like that, never let his career consume more than it gave. But life doesn't always let promises stick. In 2005, during the grueling reshoots for Cinderella Man, Ron felt that same old pattern creeping back. The sleepless nights returned, the constant decision-making, the pressure to deliver perfection once again. He was gone for months, and when he finally came home, he realized his children had grown, not just in height, but in life. While he was away, Cheryl had kept everything together with her usual quiet strength. But even then, he knew she was carrying more than her share. Later, Ron confessed this second slip forced him to confront something buried deep, a lifelong habit originating back in his childhood acting days. He'd always believed he had to say yes to everything, had to go above and beyond every single time, had to prove he deserved his spot in the industry. That hunger to be perfect had driven him to greatness, but also to guilt. It wasn't until 2025, on his and Cheryl's 50th anniversary, that Ron finally let his guard down completely. Standing at John Burroughs High School, the place where they first met, he donated a bench in her honor and spoke words that left the crowd silent. He said he would trade every award, every hit film, every single accolade just to reclaim the lost time with his children. That moment, raw and emotional, showed exactly why Rob Reiner's loss struck him so hard.
I don't know if it's because I grew up in a household of workaday actors who didn't have that kind of status, or whether it's I just recognize that it's a way of life. There's a lot of showmanship. There's a lot of hype. I sort of refuse to invest too much in status or rankings or whatnot.
Because when Rob's passing made headlines, it wasn't just an era ending, it reminded Ron of everything he'd fought for, lost, and learned along the way. Both men had lived their dreams under the same blinding light, and both knew how steep the real price of that dream could climb. Rob Reiner lived his life out loud too, passionate, outspoken, fully committed to both his art and his beliefs. But there are some battles nobody can fully control, no matter how powerful they seem. And for Ron Howard, watching Reiner's journey only deepened his own reflection on the people who shaped him, long before fame ever discovered him. Because before the awards, before marriage, before the endless spotlight, there was one relationship that built the very foundation of who Ron became, the quiet, unshakable bond with his younger brother Clint Howard. To the public, Clint was that unforgettable face, the quirky, lovable actor popping up in everything from Star Trek to Apollo 13. But to Ron, Clint wasn't just a brother. He was proof that someone else truly understood the strange, beautiful, and exhausting experience of growing up under constant studio lights. The two of them were raised side by side on neighboring sets, passing each other in hallways lined with cables and heavy lights buzzing. These were kids earning paychecks before they could even spell their names, saying lines before they had any clue who they really were. In an industry demanding perfection instead of patience, Clint was Ron's reminder he wasn't alone, that someone else knew exactly how bizarre their childhood really was. They weren't just brothers, they were co-workers, confidants, and survivors of a Hollywood childhood no outsider could ever fully imagine. But adulthood brought challenges neither expected. While Ron was directing major films and becoming one of the most trusted names in the industry, Clint was quietly battling demons of his own. The pressure, the pace, the constant judgment, it all extracted its toll. By the late 1980s, things had spiraled to a breaking point, and Ron could only watch in fear as his brother slipped further away from the life they'd built together. In 1990, completely heartbroken and desperate to help, Ron finally drew a line, delivering an ultimatum that would test the strength of their bond and change both their lives forever. Get help or lose me forever. Those were the words Ron Howard told his brother in 1990, not out of anger, but out of love so fierce it scared him. Then Clint chose to fight back, choosing recovery over destruction, and it saved him. By 2021, the Howard brothers had gone fully public with their story in their heartfelt memoir, The Boys, where they credited brutal honesty and unshakable family love for pulling Clint back from the edge. But now, decades later, a new fear has entered Ron's life, one he can't outwork, can't strategize his way around. Clint has been facing a serious health battle, one Ron described only as life-altering. The details remain private, but his voice, his posture, and that heavy look in his eyes have said more than any press statement ever could. This isn't a small setback. It's the kind of illness that rewires everything. It shifts a family's heartbeat, turning long days into hospital visits and long nights into quiet worry that never ends.
And so I recognize that ambition, that idea to go beyond, to keep reaching, to keep trying to come up with something else for audiences.
For a man who's built his entire existence around control, around calling the shots, fixing problems, rewriting endings, this has been a brutal awakening. Ron can't yell cut. He can't reset the scene. He can't protect his brother the way Clint once protected him when the cameras got too heavy and fame felt too lonely. For the first time in decades, Ron has admitted something the world never expected to hear from him. He's scared, not of failure, not of losing momentum, not of critics or pressure, but of losing the one person who's been beside him through every twist of his story. That raw, fragile honesty, that helpless love changed him in ways even his closest friends noticed. And it's this exact pain that shaped his reaction when he heard the news about Rob Reiner. Because as Clint's health worsened, Ron found himself forced to face a truth he'd buried for years. That no matter how many awards, no matter how perfect the frame, no matter how carefully you plan the ending, some stories are beyond your control. The man who spent half a century guiding Hollywood with calm precision, crafting stories that touched millions, is now facing something he can't direct, fix, or plan his way out of. For the first time, Ron Howard has had to stare directly at his own fragility, stripped of cameras, applause, or the comfort of creative control. In recent interviews, Ron confessed that what he's going through with Clint's health has shaken him deeper than any setback in his entire career. Not the disappointment of EdTV, not the pressure behind Apollo 13, not even the uphill battle of solo a Star Wars story. None of it compares to the raw, paralyzing fear of losing his brother. He described long sleepless nights replaying their childhood like a film reel, the tiny schoolroom at Desilu Studios, the hushed talks between scenes, the way Clint's presence used to make those freezing, fluorescent-lit stages feel warm again. What were once sweet, nostalgic memories have now transformed into reminders of everything he stands to lose. Ron opened up about guilt running deep. Guilt that while his own career soared to unimaginable heights, Clint was quietly fighting his own battles behind the scenes. Guilt that he didn't catch the warning signs sooner. Guilt that he couldn't protect his brother the way Clint once shielded him from the loneliness of growing up in front of cameras. That heavy regret has reshaped everything about how Ron lives now. This new chapter, one built on love, fear, and hard-won wisdom, has forced him to slow down. He stepped back from long, exhausting productions, turning down projects that would yank him away from home for months at a time. Even Imagine Entertainment, the powerhouse studio he co-founded in 1985, now runs more independently, giving him something he once thought impossible: time. No more endless call sheets, no more 18-hour days. These days, Ron Howard's life revolves around the people who've always mattered most: his family, his brother, and the fragile beauty of simply being present. And it's this grounded, vulnerable version of Ron that makes his reflections on Rob Reiner's legacy feel even more powerful, one legend quietly honoring another, both men shaped by love, loss, and the cost of caring too deeply. These days, Ron Howard's world moves at a different rhythm, slower, softer, centered around what truly matters. Family dinners, quiet conversations, and those small, irreplaceable moments he once let slip away are now the heartbeat of his life. He's made it crystal clear he refuses to lose them again. And in one of the most emotional confessions of his entire career, Ron admitted that the silence between projects has opened his eyes in ways nothing else ever could. For the first time, he dared to say it out loud. He spent decades telling everyone else's stories but forgot to tell his own. Now standing at 71 with a legacy worth over $200 million and a lifetime of triumphs behind him, he's finally realizing that all those awards and hit films mean nothing if the people you love start fading from your world. Fans were stunned, not by the fact Ron had struggled, but by the revelation that he carried so much pain in total silence. The man everyone saw as calm, steady, and endlessly kind had been fighting private battles for years without ever showing the cracks. And when he finally spoke, the heartbreak was undeniable. Some wounds, it turns out, never fully heal, even for one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. But just as Ron began finding peace in this slower, more grounded chapter of his life, the world around him shattered once again. Another kind of loss, sudden, shocking, and deeply painful, ripped through the industry. The devastating news of Rob Reiner's passing hit like a storm nobody saw coming. Ron was already standing on emotional thin ice, grappling with his brother Clint's worsening condition, weighed down by fear, guilt, and regret. And then came the headline that stopped him cold. Rob Reiner, gone at 78, his wife Michelle Singer too. The tragedy sent shockwaves across Hollywood, leaving friends, fans, and colleagues speechless. For Ron, it wasn't just another news story. It was a gut punch from life itself. He'd already been facing the heartbreak of watching someone he loved slip away, and now he was confronted with the loss of another person who defined so much of his own journey. And as the industry reeled, Ron Howard, the man who always stayed composed, found himself shaken in a way words could barely capture. Ron Howard, a man known for his calm composure and quiet control, was completely blindsided by what happened to Rob Reiner. The suddenness, the horror, the sheer intensity of it all left him shaken to his core. Ron had always respected Rob, not just as a filmmaker, but as a force of nature. Rob's fierce energy, his razor-sharp humor, and his fearless activism had always stood in perfect contrast to Ron's own quiet, methodical style. Yet beneath those differences, they shared the same creative fire that only true storytellers understand. Both men had grown up inside the demanding world of Hollywood, molded by cameras and expectations since childhood. Both had battled through studio politics, fought for creative control, and carried the invisible pressure of keeping their work authentic in an industry constantly pushing for compromise. They were two sides of the same coin, one loud and impassioned, the other patient and precise, but both deeply driven by the same obsession with truth. So when the terrible report surfaced, the reality hit like a punch to the chest. The details were graphic, the kind of thing that made the entire entertainment world fall silent. Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer had both been found gone under horrifying circumstances, their daughter Rory discovering them in what police called a violent scene. It wasn't peaceful, it wasn't gentle, it was shocking and incomprehensible, an ending nobody could process, least of all Ron, already struggling with the emotional toll of his brother Clint's declining health. This tragedy struck him on a completely different level. Those close to Ron said he was visibly shaken, haunted not only by the loss of a friend and peer, but by the sheer brutality of it all. One insider shared quietly that Ron just kept repeating, "How could this happen to Rob? How could this happen to Michelle?" For a man who'd spent his life controlling chaos through storytelling, this moment shattered every illusion of order he had left. And as the world searched for answers, Ron Howard found himself staring straight into the kind of darkness he'd spent his entire career trying to make sense of. And this time, there was no script to fix it. The tragedy shook Ron Howard to his core. It shattered his sense of safety and tore apart the order he thought he understood. The outpouring of grief for Rob Reiner was massive, flooding social media and news outlets with love, heartbreak, and disbelief. It proved just how deeply Rob had touched people, not only through his films, but through his voice, his courage, and his passion for truth. But for Ron, that grief carried another layer, a painfully personal reflection. As the tributes poured in, he couldn't help but see his own ongoing struggle with loss mirrored right back at him. He'd always admired Rob's boldness, his willingness to speak up, to jump into debates most directors would dodge. Ron, on the other hand, had always taken the quieter route, showing people who they are through story rather than telling them what to think. But in this moment of shared pain, all those differences dissolved. There were no sides, no styles, no personas, only heartbreak, only the fragile humanity connecting us all. Those close to Ron said he was haunted by thoughts of Rob and Michelle's final moments. Already raw from his brother Clint's illness and the fear of time slipping away, this tragedy hit him in the most personal way imaginable. He thought back to Reiner's final interview, the one that left fans and friends in tears, where Rob spoke so beautifully about love, family, and legacy. The irony cut deep. Rob had reflected on mortality with such peace and grace, never imagining his story would end so violently. In a rare public statement shared quietly without any Hollywood polish, Ron expressed his grief in simple, heartfelt words. He spoke of Rob not just as the actor, director, or activist, but as the man behind all that, a man devoted to love, truth, and family. He praised the way Rob used his platform to challenge the world, to make people think even when they didn't always agree. "This kind of senseless loss," Ron said softly, "it makes you question everything. It makes you hold your loved ones closer." His voice, usually so steady, cracked as he added, "Rob and Michelle were passionate people devoted to each other and to making a difference. That's the kind of legacy you never forget. Their loss in such a devastating, senseless way is a wound to us all." Ron Howard said, his voice trembling with emotion, "My heart goes out to their children, especially to Rory who found them. No one should ever have to face something so heartbreaking." Those words, quiet but heavy, captured the ache of an entire community mourning two lives that had meant so much to so many. Ron went on to reflect on something deeply personal, the shared journey that he, Rob Reiner, and so many others had taken. "We grow up together in this business," he said softly. "Some of us from the time we're kids. We become witnesses to each other's stories, the highs, the lows, the moments no one else ever sees." He paused, then added, "When something like this happens, it stops you. It forces you to really see how fragile it all is, how unpredictable, how easily it can all change in a single moment." Ron, already struggling with the fear of losing his brother Clint, felt the shock of Rob and Michelle's passing like a painful echo of everything he was already living through. It was a cruel reminder that no matter how much control you try holding onto, life will always find ways to remind you who's really in charge. The tragedy didn't just break his heart. It deepened his understanding of what truly matters. It reinforced every truth he'd recently come to embrace. The vow to slow down, to be present, to hold on to family tighter than ever before. The realization that he'd spent decades telling the world's stories while silencing his own now carried even more weight. The heartbreaking end of Rob Reiner's life, a man who'd lived boldly, loved loudly, and created endlessly, became more than just a loss for Ron Howard. It was a mirror, a warning, and a lesson all at once. It reminded him and everyone watching that no matter how bright Hollywood's lights shine, the real legacy is what happens off camera, in the time we share, the people we hold close, and the love we never take for granted. In the weeks that followed Rob Reiner's tragic passing, a strange unspoken tension began surfacing around Ron Howard, not from anger or blame, but from the heavy swirl of unfinished history between the two men. Their friendship had always carried layers outsiders never fully understood. Beneath the public admiration and professional respect, there'd also been rivalry, quiet, complicated, and sometimes sharp enough to sting. Rob and Ron had always walked parallel paths in Hollywood, each carving out his own empire. Both sons of the industry, both storytellers who understood the cost of greatness, yet their philosophies couldn't have been more different. Rob Reiner was loud, fearless, unfiltered. He believed in shaking the table to make change happen. Ron Howard was the opposite, careful, composed, always choosing subtlety over spectacle. And though they respected each other deeply, that difference sometimes sparked friction running deeper than anyone ever realized. There were whispers, even among close friends, that the two had quietly competed for the same projects over the years. Scripts passed between studios. Producers torn between Reiner's fire and Howard's finesse. It was never public, never petty, but it was real. They were like two planets locked in the same orbit, drawn together by respect, yet pushed apart by pride. Now, in the wake of Rob's loss, that tension feels haunting. People close to Ron say he's been replaying old conversations, moments when he could have reached out but didn't. Industry insiders remember seeing them at events, exchanging polite smiles, their warmth always wrapped in a layer of professional distance. They admired each other, one longtime friend said, but they also challenged each other, maybe more than either of them wanted to admit. And now with Reiner gone, Ron is left carrying that weight. The guilt of a friendship never fully resolved, the ache of rivalry without reconciliation. In one recent interview when asked about Rob, Ron paused for a long time before speaking. His voice dropped low. "We didn't always see eye to eye, but he made me better. Maybe I just never told him that." That single line, quiet, simple, and loaded with emotion, told the whole story. Two men who built Hollywood legacies side by side, forever linked by respect, rivalry, and the haunting question of what might have been said if there'd been just one more conversation. As the weeks turned into months, the tension between Rob Reiner's legacy and Ron Howard's reflection only deepened. Hollywood was still grieving, but behind the candlelight tributes and award show dedications, something else was stirring. The quiet unraveling of untold truths between two men who'd shaped an entire generation of cinema. Insiders began revisiting moments from the past, subtle exchanges that suddenly seemed heavier in hindsight. There'd always been an undercurrent between Rob and Ron. Not hostility, but that electric tension coming when two perfectionists see pieces of themselves in each other. Rob's intensity often pushed Ron to take bolder creative risks, while Ron's patience and precision forced Rob to slow down and think deeper. They weren't enemies. They were mirrors reflecting the parts of one another they couldn't face. In interviews, Ron began speaking more openly about that dynamic. "Rob and I didn't compete the way people think," he said carefully. "It wasn't about box office or acclaim. It was about something else, about legacy, about meaning." His eyes lingered as if searching for the right words. "We pushed each other without even trying to. I think we both wanted to outdo the silence between us." That single sentence sent ripples through the industry, a quiet admission that there'd always been more beneath their polite exchanges and red carpet smiles. There were stories of meetings ending in creative disagreements, of studio pitches where both men unknowingly circled the same scripts, of a phone call never returned after a misinterpreted comment. Tiny moments that seemed irrelevant back then now pulsed with unspoken regret. Ron's friends say he's been digging through old photos and letters, even rewatching Stand By Me and A Few Good Men, films he once praised publicly but privately analyzed for what Reiner had done differently. And when asked recently what he'd say to Rob if he could speak to him one last time, Ron's answer silenced the room. "I'd tell him we were both wrong. It was never a competition. We were trying to say the same thing, just in two different languages." That admission hit deep because maybe beneath the rivalry, beneath the awards and the admiration, what bound Ron Howard and Rob Reiner most wasn't competition at all. It was the shared ache of artists trying to make sense of the same fragile, unpredictable world. By early 2026, the story of Rob Reiner's passing had begun fading from headlines. But for Ron Howard, it hadn't faded at all. It lingered in every thought, every interview, every quiet moment when the camera stopped rolling. What the world saw as closure, Ron experienced as a wound refusing to heal. Because the truth wasn't just about grief. It was about everything left unsaid between two men who'd once walked side by side in Hollywood's blinding light. He found himself replaying their last real conversation years before Rob's death at a charity event in Beverly Hills. The crowd was buzzing, flashes everywhere, and yet the moment between them was almost eerily calm. Rob had laughed and said, "You know, Ronnie, we're both control freaks pretending we're easygoing guys." Ron had smiled, but deep down the words hit home. That was Reiner. Direct, insightful, just a little too honest. Ron never forgot it, and now with Rob gone, that line echoed in his head like a haunting refrain he couldn't silence. Friends say Ron has been working on something quietly. Not a blockbuster, not a studio project, but something deeply personal. A script inspired by two filmmakers, their shared beginnings, and the invisible rivalry that shaped them both. "It's not about Rob exactly," one source explained, "but you can feel him in every line. It's like Ron's writing the conversation they never got to finish." There's talk the script might be his most emotional work yet. Part tribute, part confession, part farewell. Ron hasn't said if he'll ever release it, but those who've read early drafts say it's filled with raw honesty, pain, and admiration. The story centers on two storytellers who keep trying to outdo each other, only to realize too late they were both reaching for the same truth all along. When asked recently if the project was connected to Reiner, Ron only gave a faint smile and said, "Let's just say it's about what happens when you lose the person who understood you the most, even when you didn't understand each other." And just like that, it became clear. Ron Howard wasn't trying to escape the tension anymore. He was finally turning it into art, and that's where the story finally lands. Not with a clean resolution, but with the quiet truth of two men who spent their lives trying to tell the world stories while still searching for their own. Ron Howard and Rob Reiner, two names forever tied to Hollywood's golden age. Each left a mark that can't be erased. One, the careful craftsman who built worlds out of emotion and empathy. The other, the fearless voice who challenged the world to think, to feel, to speak up. Different paths, different styles, but the same fire burning at their core, the need to make meaning out of life's chaos. In the wake of Rob's loss, Ron stands not as a rival, not as a peer, but as a man changed, softer, more reflective, finally at peace with the idea that legacy isn't about perfection, it's about connection. His story, Rob's story, Clint's story, they're all reminders that behind the cameras, the headlines, and the awards, these are real lives unfolding, full of love, regret, and resilience. And maybe that's what makes it all so powerful, because at the end of every film, every career, every friendship, there's still that one shared truth. We only get so much time, and it's up to us to make it count. So what do you think? Was their quiet rivalry a curse or a hidden gift? Did it push them toward greatness or keep them from finding peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you think about the untold tension between Ron Howard and Rob Reiner. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can uncover the side of Hollywood nobody talks about. Every click helps us keep bringing you these deep, emotional looks into the lives behind the legends. Because some stories don't end when the credits roll, sometimes they just begin to make sense.